Morning. We had a master class from Shashidharan sir, and I'm sure so many of us are disappointed. We are very happy to hear what is scientifically right, but we have not been following the things that sir said for decades. I'm indeed happy and would like to congratulate Dr. Jacob George, Dr. Bipin, and their whole gang for getting this rolling. This is indeed a very happy moment for all of us doctors in Kerala. Let's give them a good applause. Actually, I also heard about or started thinking about the gut microbiome after I heard a session by Dr. Jacob George. I think it was a few months back at the Association of Surgeons of India conference. It was viral on YouTube. So he was talking about the amount of gut microbiome DNA as well as the human DNA that we have or that we acquire over a period of time. Actually, when we were born, we had 100% human DNA. At the same time, after a few years, it became 99% our gut microbiome DNA. So our gut microbiome plays a major role in everything related to our health as well as illness. We are all, as doctors, we are all trained in, like sir was saying, in illness basically, how to manage illness and not in health. Our classes in nutrition were very few. We hardly had any questions from nutrition during our college days. And we studied very little about exercise also. That is why most of the doctors are actually have a lesser lifespan than the normal population. So let us jump into the gut microbiome and how we can manage it to the microbiome satisfaction, because most of our DNA is in the gut. How many bacteria do we have in our gut and where do they reside? We have something like 50 to 100 trillion bacteria. They have not been counted as such, but the whole concept is that we have at least 50 to 100 trillion bacteria. How much is 1 trillion? 1 trillion is 1,000 billion. Million is 6 zeros, billion is 9 zeros, and trillion is 12 zeros. So we are going to be, as Modi ji says, we are going to be a 5 trillion economy. At the same time, we are harboring more than 50 trillion bacteria in our gut. And where do they reside? 99.5 to 9% of them reside in the large intestine. Now let us go far back and think about what we learned about the large intestine. Very little. Water absorption, very little. Nothing that would fetch us an essay question in MBBS courses. So basically these, why do we have so many gut bacteria in the large intestine? And what is their role? They play a huge role. They are the one who decide on what mood we are in, what sort of, do we get good sleep? Are we happy? Do we have enough serotonin? In fact, it is said that 85 to 90% of serotonin, which is called the happiness hormone, it is very common now. Serotonin discussions are very common. People say that people in Bhutan have very high serotonin levels. They are pretty happy compared to so many of the Western population. So 85 to 90% of the serotonin is made by the gut microbiome and not in the brain. 50% of dopamine is made in the gut. 50% of so many hormones, melatonin, which actually controls our sleep, that is also made by the gut microbiome. So we have this huge army. Indian army is only second to the Chinese army. we have this huge army residing in the large intestine. And what do they relish having, just like we relish having processed foods, junk foods? What do they eat? What do they survive on, this gut microbiome? We usually discuss during our sessions. You had today, those of you who had breakfast from the alumni hall, we had appam and muttakari. And for people like me who are vegetarians, we had a vegetable curry also. Afternoon, we'll have fish curry meals with papad, pickles, maybe ഒരു തോരനോ ഒരു cabbage തോരനോ എന്തെങ്കിലും കാണും. Evening you have your snack as well as your tea. At night you have 3 chapatis and chicken curry, and if somebody is consuming this, they are considered to be on a very balanced diet. They are not eating any fast food, they are not eating any processed food. But at the same time, you have to think about how much of fiber is there in this today's diet. And how much of fiber do we need every day? Because we have to feed the microbiome every day. It is said that 100 years back, a human being used to consume something like 100 grams of calories a day. We don't have statistics for Indian population, but in the US, they consume something like 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day. Compared to 100 grams 100 years back, 10 to 15 grams, and they are advising the US population to consume something like 30 to 35 grams of fiber a day. Yet we are consuming I think most of the doctors and their families are consuming much less. At least on those days when we are eating out, we are consuming very little, very, very, very little fiber. This is the difference between what happens to a high fiber diet and a low fiber diet. Supposing you are having that diet which I mentioned now. Along with that, you can add a little bit of Swiggy, Zomato stuff that we purchase every day, fruit juices, Tropicana, maybe a bit of alcohol, sweets. Whenever we have a nice, happy occasion, we have even the hospital. Sara, ende mook 5 A+ kitti, laddu. It's always like that. Most of the snacks, we have a coffee club in our hospital, most of the snacks are very, very unhealthy. Either it is, as we say in Trivandrum, it is enna palaharam, or it is sweet. It hardly ever has any fiber in it. So, there are 2 kinds of foods, as you can see in the picture. The upper one is high fiber. The lower one is low fiber, very low fiber. So, the lower one gets absorbed before it reaches the large intestine. The upper one gets absorbed only in the large intestine. Why? Because until it reaches the mycobacteria in the gut or the microbiome, we have only 20 enzymes. And how many enzymes do we have in the large intestine? How many enzymes can you guess? We have more than 1,000 enzymes in the large intestine. Our gut microbiota have more than 1,000 enzymes to digest all this fiber, high fiber diet. So the low fiber diet gets absorbed in the small intestine itself. At the same time, the large intestine, the microbiota in the large intestine is starving. And it is too powerful to starve. It becomes very angry. If you are continuously starving it of what it needs, which is a high fiber diet, it becomes really, really, really angry. and it starts doing something very nasty. It starts migrating into the small intestine, which is something called SIBO, S-I-B-O. SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So if you continue to have a low fiber diet for days on end, because you do not have diabetes, because you do not have any lifestyle disease, no dyslipidemia, no liver disease, no renal disease, no heart disease, nothing of that sort. That is what most people say. ഇത്രയും മധുരം വേണോ? എനിക്ക് ഡയബറ്റിസ് ഇല്ല. എപ്പോഴും ഫിഷ് ഫ്രൈ വേണോ? എനിക്ക് വേറെ അങ്ങനത്തെ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ, കൊളസ്ട്രോൾ അതൊന്നുമില്ല. So we tend to follow our whims and fancies regarding taste and what we think is healthy. So the microbiota which live in the colon, the 50 to 100 trillion of them are starving. So they enter the small intestine. What happens when they enter the small intestine? They start creating a lot of trouble. Lot of trouble means their main job is our immunity. That is the main job of the microbiota in the large intestine. So what happens to our immunity? It goes down. When our immunity goes down, what happens? Illness pops up. So supposing, till now we were talking about the wrong scenario. What wrong is happening in the large intestine. Now let us say we are feeding the large intestine with at least 30 grams of fiber every day. What is fiber? Is it carbohydrates or non-carbohydrates? They are all carbohydrates. Does any non-vegetarian item have fiber? Milk, egg, meat, fish, they all have very good, very small amounts of fiber, but at the same time, very good protein. So Sir was talking about the protein sources, that you don't get it from the grains, but at the same time, you get it from carbohydrates, which are complex carbohydrates, which are very difficult to absorb in the small intestine. So for the time being, till we come to the short chain fatty acids, let us talk about the fiber-rich diet that we can have. There's a very short form. I forgot to put in a slide regarding that, or else you could have all snapped that slide. But I'll tell you, in a short form, which all foods contain fiber. And you have to try to include as many of these in your daily diet as possible. The short form is F goals. F. F stands for fruits and fermented foods. F. G stands for greens and grains. O stands for omega-3, which is hemp seed, flax seed, chia seed. G grains and greens, O omega-3. A stands for aromatics, onion, shallots, garlic. L stands for the superfood or legumes. നമ്മുടെ ചെറുപയർ, വൻപയർ, വെള്ളക്കടല, കറുത്ത കടല, രാജ്മ, അതെല്ലാം കൂടെ. And the nuts and seeds, almonds, cucumber, all the seeds you can include under legumes. And then G, O, A, L and S. S stands for shrooms or mushrooms and seaweed. Two populations, even if they are westernized, one is the Japanese as well as the Koreans, even if they go to the US and settle down there, they have very good health. That is because they are consuming a lot of seaweed and fermented foods. Natto is a fermented food for the Japanese. Kimchi is a fermented food for the Koreans. So supposing we consume a lot of all these food items that I mentioned now and get a lot of fiber into your diet and keep the microbiome happy, what happens to these food items? They are converted to SCFAs. They are converted to short-chain fatty acids. So this is a mixture of what all could be happening. We have a daily diet of both, of course, as Sir mentioned, after the fresh air and the water, then he mentioned vegetables, and then he mentioned protein sources. So likewise, let us keep the protein sources for the small intestine and the starchy carbohydrate sources for the microbiome. As mentioned here, the human genome contains less than 20 genes to degrade the dietary carbohydrates. So all the genes that are contained in the microbiome are residing in the large intestine. So you have to provide them with the food that they need for each and every meal. This is an electron microscope picture of the gut of a mouse taken by Erika Sonnenberg. The Sonnenbergs are really into, they are from Harvard, they are researchers in gut microbiome as well as fermented foods. So this is, the multicolored part is the gut microbiome of a high fiber mouse, which has been consuming high fiber mouse. They did a study on four generations of mice. For us to do a study on 4 generations of human beings, it would be very, very difficult. Generations of mice is pretty easy. So this is a high fiber diet consuming mouse. And look at the diversity of their gut microbiome. That is the multicolored part. The second one is actually the lumen of their intestine. And the third one is the nuclei of inside the intestine. This is an electron microscopic pic. This is the B is fed with a high fiber diet, and C is fed with a fiber deficient diet. And just look at what is happening to the lumen. The lumen of B is intact. At the same time, the lumen of C is sort of deranged. So this is what happens in our gut also. If you leave them to starvation, if you leave our gut microbiome to starvation, they'll start eating up the mucinous area of our lining of our gut. So that makes it is something called, it is not in our scientific parlance, otherwise it's called a leaky gut. If you hear so many of the YouTubers, the famous YouTubers, I mean doctors, not the dietitians, famous YouTubers like Bull Bilsovich, then Dr. Robert Lutzig, Dr. Robert Davies, they have all written major books on the gut microbiome as well as fiber. One is Fiber Fuel by Dr. Bill. Another one is which Dr. Bibin is also referring to. He'll refer to that. It is Metabolical by Robert Lutzig. And another one is The Good Gut by Dr. Richard Davis. And the fourth one is, I haven't bought that book yet, that is by the Sonnenbergs, a husband and wife combination. It is called The Good Gut. It was printed and published a few years back. So this is what is happening in our gut. Even though this is a picturization of the mouse gut, the same thing could be happening in our gut also. Now, because the heading for my talk includes fermented foods also, we should, think I should say a few words about fermented foods. Those who consume fermented foods every day, please raise your hands. Those who consume dosha and idli and think that dosha and idli batter has fermented foods, please raise your hands. Those who consume curd every day, please raise your hands. Okay. Dosha and idli batter also contain fermentation. It is also fermented, but the moment you put it in the fire, it's all lost. And those who make curd at home, please raise your hands. Those who buy curd from outside. What is the difference between curd bought from outside and making curd at home? Curd bought from outside is actually not fermented. That is why they are keeping it in the refrigerator. Curd made at home is fermented, but the one that is bought from outside is, it is made to taste like a fermented curd. That is all. So this page just gives a representation about all the good microbiome that you can acquire by just consuming these fermented foods. Recently, on the 8th of last month, we had a session at IMA Trivandrum, and Dr. Reggie, she couldn't be here today, we did a session on nutrition, and there were around 30 participants. She bought kefir for each and every person and gave it to them. And most of them are putting kefir now. Kefir is very similar to yogurt. It has got some grains. It is available. If you can just note down this KEFIR, it is available on Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon. It's very easy to prepare. All these fermented foods are very easy to prepare. Kefir, you put the grains in just plain milk without boiling it. It can be homogenized pasteurized milk also, because we are scared of buying the normal cow's milk and consuming it. It can be any milk, any sort of milk. Just put these grains in the milk, wait for 24 to 30 hours, consume it. Sieve out the grains, put it in a small bottle of, a glass bottle of milk, put it in the fridge. The next time you want to use it, you use the same grains. Yogurt, we all know. Sauerkraut, has anybody heard about sauerkraut? Is anybody making sauerkraut at home? Adam is making sauerkraut at home. Sauerkraut is very easy to prepare. You buy cabbage. Any household which doesn't buy cabbage? She doesn't buy cabbage. So you just chop up the cabbage, sprinkle a little bit of salt. There is a calculation to the salt that you can sprinkle. It is 2 to 2.5% of the weight of the cabbage. Supposing the cabbage weighs 1 kg. You just take the stem from the middle portion, just chop it up, not grind it to a thoran level akanda, just chop it up, then put 2.2 to 2.5, that is 25 grams. 25 grams is something like 2 tablespoons. Just sprinkle it on top. Put it in a glass jar. With very clean hands, just give it a roll for some time, let us say 5 to 10 minutes. Keep on just and then keep it like that. Put a piece of cloth on top of it, keep it like that for half an hour to 45 minutes. Then if you start squeezing it again, a juice comes out of it. Then you put it in a glass jar, squeeze it really down so that the juice that has come out of the cabbage remains on top. Why should you remain on top? Why should it remain on top? Because fermentation is anaerobic, completely anaerobic. The moment it comes in contact with the air in the atmosphere or in the glass jar, it becomes spoiled. Why? Because the large intestinal mycobacteria is anaerobic. If it comes in touch with the oxygen, it gets spoiled. There are lots of, you can look up fermented jars on Amazon. There are lots of jars with paper, with weights on top, glass weights on top, and you can use this sauerkraut also. All these are fermented foods which can be made at home. Can you just tell me one of the common fermented foods that are available in our stores now other than curd? Paneer is, yeah, it is fermented, but something which you can just have. It is a drink. Pardon? Kombucha tea. Yeah, kombucha tea is available in so many stores like Kumbakonam coffee. It is kept in the refrigerator. It is pretty costly. It is made using a SCOBY. But kombucha tea that you get from the shop is actually not fermented. And people who are guys, boys and girls who are not allowed to have beer at home would prefer to go and buy kombucha tea, keep it outside the refrigerator and have it at night. It is actually not fermented food, but it becomes fermented in another sort of way. Somebody mentioned cheese. Cheese you cannot have directly. These are what the short chain fatty acid does on its own. Almost everything related to our health. So everything depends upon the manufacturing of short chain fatty acids in our large intestine. So what should we do? My passionate plea to you is, please start taking more fiber. Please consume more fiber in your diet. Find out where you can get all these fermented foods. Try making them at home, because that is going to look after your health in future. I'll leave you with a small... I have 1 more minute or 2 minutes? 3 more minutes. There is a 25 to 30-year-old study which is called the Blue Zone study. There is a documentary about the Blue Zone study in Netflix. I think it is still there. It is 6 or 7 episodes. When you get time, all of you should watch that. It is a study about healthy longevity in 5 or 6 populations from around the world. Osaka and Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Greece, Sicilia in Italy, Loma Linda in the US, and our own Jain community in India. And they found out some aspects of their lifestyle which are common to all of them. These people live far away, in far off places. One group lives in Japan, one in Greece, one in Italy, one in the US, and one in India. They all have a few things in common. Number 1, eat less. Number 2, eat less often. Like Sir was saying, human beings are the only community, only people in the animal kingdom who consume food without actually being hungry. Because we say we have to have breakfast. We have to eat it at one particular time itself. So eat less often, exercise moderately, cook your own food, and if possible, grow your own food. And finally, to leave you with a saying by Mark Pollan, he said, eat food, not processed. Eat less of food. Eat more of plants. Thank you.
Thank you, Sankar sir, for a dynamic and wonderful presentation. Hope we will have 2 questions from the floor. Any questions from the floor? Or sir will ask a question to the audience.
Bibin told me that I should ask a question. I am not prepared to ask a question. But let us say something related to the gut of fermented food.
So you mentioned about that sauerkraut, no? So how do you eat it finally? You said cabbage ingane vechu, adingane juice vannu. How is he eating?
You have to keep it outside on the kitchen shelf for 4 to 5 days. Every day you have to open it for a few seconds, so that it lets out the whatever oxidation has happened inside that portion in between the water and the jar lid. You let it out. You have to close it again. Wait for 4 to 5 days. What I usually do is, filter paper, acid alkali filter paper. I just dip it in and see whether it has become acid, whether it has turned from red to blue. Once it has turned from red to blue, you just taste it. And if you like the sour taste more, sour taste has more fermentation. You can stop fermenting the day you like the taste. It is delicious. I made this at home and I got very little of it because they all started consuming it. So, and then you keep it in the fridge and keep on taking a little bit of it every day outside. You can keep fermented foods without spoiling in the fridge for something like a month. And another thing Madam was saying, apart from this question, which I wanted to answer, is what is the difference between, I'll make this my question, what is the difference between pickling and fermenting? Anyone who says there are 2 differences, pickling and fermenting. Salt is added in fermentation also. Oil is added in pickling and canning. That is
in pickling, there is dehydration occurring of the material that is put
biochemistry.
No, there are 2 simple differences. One is in fermentation, as I already mentioned, it is only 2 to 2.5%, the salt. Second one is, pickle you can take from the shelf in the store. Fermented food will be in the refrigerator. Because if you keep it outside, it gets spoiled. But pickle you can, pickling and canning, like Madam mentioned, can be kept in the shelf for a long period of time. Nammal vaangikkunna ellam pickle aanu. It's not fermented. I don't think kimchi and sauerkraut are available in our stores even now.
Thank you, sir. The prize is for Sankar sir.
Mike. Can we take too much egg yolk?
Can we take too much egg yolk?
Egg yolk. I think it is a question for
Sir will answer that.
One egg yolk at one meal is all right. Maximum 2. But why do you take egg yolk alone? Whole egg only. Whole egg up to 2 eggs at one meal you can take. But at one meal. Maximum 3 eggs per day. Not together, distributed in 3 meals. There is no harm in taking egg daily. I take at least 2 eggs a day.
So, yeah, I've heard about that. I'm not very sure. I try to find out because everybody keeps asking. This word keeps popping up. There are lots of other fermented foods also. All over India, there are lots of fermented foods. Actually, India is a wealth of fermented foods in each population. Even the curding that we do, it is done in different forms in different places. When I was in Palakkad last year, each time I took the this thing, what do you call it, the seed curd, it was getting spoiled. So what I finally did was, ഞെട്ട് പൊട്ടിക്കാതെ ഒരു പച്ചമുളക് പാലിലിട്ട് വെച്ചു. പിറ്റേ ദിവസം it was perfect curd. So it is actually from the nature. I am not aware of this thing. Thank you.